You have chased a mirage for years, sacrificing your peace, your relationships, and your sleep, only to finally grasp the prize and feel absolutely nothing. This is the ultimate modern tragedy, arriving at the summit of your ambitions, looking around and realizing the mountain is entirely barren. You thought the promotion, the money, or the status would fix the void inside you. Instead, the void merely expanded. Why does getting exactly what we desire often leave us feeling utterly hollow? In this video, you will discover the exact Stoic psychological framework required to cure this crushing emptiness and finally find lasting fulfillment. 2,000 years ago, one of the wealthiest men in the Roman Empire stood in the center of unprecedented opulence and felt this exact same profound emptiness. Seneca the Younger was an advisor to the Emperor Nero, a man who possessed sprawling estates, infinite gold, and boundless political influence. Yet, beneath the luxurious surface of his life, Seneca observed a haunting reality among the Roman elite. They were acquiring everything they had ever dreamed of, yet they remained deeply miserable, restless, and completely dissatisfied. Seneca realized that the human mind is a bottomless vessel when it chases external validation. Seneca understood a psychological trap that modern science now calls the hedonic treadmill. The ancient Stoics recognized that our desires are naturally infinite, while the material world is strictly finite. When Seneca looked at the most successful men of Rome, he saw prisoners chained to their own relentless cravings. They would conquer an entire province just to satisfy a fleeting urge, only to wake up the next morning feeling the exact same gnawing emptiness. The Stoics knew that an empire built on the foundation of chasing external acquisitions is doomed to collapse under the weight of endless expectations.
The emptiness you feel after achieving your goal is known as the arrival fallacy. We operate under the dangerous illusion that once we attain a specific milestone, our internal state will permanently transform into happiness. We tell ourselves that the next paycheck, the next relationship, or the next accolade will finally be enough. But the Stoics teach us that external objects possess absolutely no power to alter our internal architecture. A new title or a heavier bank account cannot rewire a restless soul. When you rely on the outside world for peace, you guarantee your own misery.
The former slave turned philosopher, Epictetus, offered a brilliant diagnosis for this chronic modern sickness. He stated that it is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about those things. You feel empty because you placed an impossible burden of expectation upon a completely indifferent outcome. You demanded that a piece of paper, a job title, or a specific number in your account provide you with spiritual salvation. By outsourcing your sense of worth to achievements, you have effectively abandoned your own fortress of mind. You have handed the keys of your happiness to blind fortune. Desire is a subtle contract you make with yourself to remain unhappy until you get what you want. But the cruel trick of human psychology is that the moment the contract is fulfilled, the mind instantly drafts a new one. The Stoics observed that humans are uniquely capable of ruining a perfect present moment by comparing it to an imagined, idealized future. You spent years chasing a specific destination, and now that you have arrived, your mind simply pushes the horizon further away. You are mourning the loss of the chase, not the acquisition of the prize. Marcus Aurelius, a man who literally commanded the known world, frequently reminded himself of the absolute insignificance of fame and achievement. He wrote in his private journal about the conquerors, kings, and elites who had everything, yet still vanished into the dust of history. If the most powerful emperor in human history realized that external acquisitions could not cure the emptiness of the human condition, why do we foolishly believe that our modern pursuits will be any different? Aurelius understood that true fulfillment is generated entirely from within, through the rigorous cultivation of character and personal virtue.
The fundamental error we commit is attempting to fill a spiritual void with material possessions. The feeling of emptiness after a major victory is your mind's way of aggressively signaling that you are solving the wrong problem. You are applying a physical remedy to a philosophical illness. You believed the destination would magically bestow you with an identity, a sense of purpose, and unshakable confidence. When the initial dopamine rush of success inevitably fades, you are left alone with yourself again. The mirror reflects the exact same person, carrying the exact same unhealed internal wounds.
Modern society has trained us to confuse the sudden spike of cheap dopamine with the profound tranquility of eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is the ancient Greek concept of human flourishing, a state of deep, enduring fulfillment that relies entirely on rational living and moral integrity. Dopamine is fleeting, highly addictive, and leaves a hollow crater when it dissipates. When you got what you wanted, you experienced a chemical high that crashed, leaving you stranded in the wasteland of reality. The Stoic path rejects these chaotic emotional swings, seeking instead a stable, internal harmony that remains completely immune to external circumstances.
To break free from this cycle of endless yearning and inevitable disappointment, you must fundamentally redefine your definition of success. Success can no longer be measured by the accolades you collect, the attention you command, or the wealth you accumulate. True Stoic success is the quiet, unbreakable mastery over your own mind. It is the ability to walk through the highest peaks of triumph and the lowest valleys of failure with the exact same unbothered expression. When your goal is mastery over yourself rather than mastery over the world, you can never be robbed of your prize.
How do we apply this profound Stoic realization to our daily lives? You must begin by violently detaching your sense of self-worth from the final outcome of your endeavors. Focus entirely on the intense rigor of the process, the purity of your effort, and the discipline of your daily routine. If you are building a business, find your joy in the act of building, not in the fantasy of the eventual sale. When you fall in love with the work itself, the ultimate result becomes entirely irrelevant. The action becomes its own deeply satisfying and eternal reward.
The next actionable step is to practice the Stoic exercise of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before you even achieve your grand ambition, deliberately visualize the moment of success, but strip away all the magical thinking. Imagine the promotion arriving, and alongside it, the increased stress, the lingering boredom, and the same internal doubts. By mentally rehearsing the reality of the achievement, you completely dismantle the dangerous illusion of the arrival fallacy. You protect your mind from the crashing disappointment because you never allowed yourself to expect a utopian paradise in the first place.
Finally, you must cultivate a ruthless, uncompromising gratitude for the exact moment you are currently in. This is the essence of amor fati, the love of one's fate. The emptiness you feel is a direct result of constantly living in an imaginary future. You must anchor yourself forcefully into the present. Look at the life you currently possess. It contains elements that a younger version of yourself desperately prayed for. Stop sprinting toward an invisible finish line and learn to inhabit the architecture of your current reality. The only time and place you can ever be fulfilled is right now.
There is a powerful historical account of Alexander the Great that perfectly illustrates the peril of infinite ambition. Alexander spent his entire youth conquering the known world, pushing his armies across brutal deserts and towering mountains. He was driven by a burning obsession to reach the absolute limits of the earth. But when he finally reached the edge of the Indian subcontinent, looking out at the endless expanse of the ocean, he did not feel joy. Legend says that Alexander the Great wept bitterly. He wept because there were no more worlds left for him to conquer.
Alexander possessed more wealth, power, and glory than any human being in history, yet his mind was a tormented prison. He was the ultimate victim of the arrival fallacy. He conquered the entire external world, but completely failed to conquer himself. His tragedy stands as a massive monument to the folly of chasing external achievements to cure internal unrest. If the man who owned the world felt entirely empty at the end of his journey, your salvation will certainly not be found in your next promotion, your next purchase, or your next fleeting moment of societal applause.
We promised you the exact technique the world's most powerful emperor used to stay stress-free. Marcus Aurelius cured his emptiness by turning his gaze violently inward. He realized that the only territory worth conquering is the human mind. The void you feel right now is not a sign of failure. It is a profound awakening. It is the realization that the external world cannot save you. Stop chasing the mirage on the horizon. Cultivate virtue, command your own desires, and build a fortress of inner peace. The emptiness vanishes the exact moment you realize you are already.
Every second, thousands of strangers on the internet are tearing someone apart, and most of the people being torn apart, founders, leaders, thinkers, crumble. They delete posts. They apologize for their own existence. They let anonymous voices rearrange their identity. But one man, 2,000 years ago, faced a level of public hatred, political slander, and institutional betrayal that would shatter any modern influencer. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact psychological framework Marcus Aurelius used to remain unshaken. A method so precise, so ruthless in its clarity, you will never read a hateful comment the same way again.
Marcus Aurelius was born in 121 AD into Roman aristocracy, a world where power was both a privilege and a sentence. At the age of 17, Emperor Hadrian noticed something unusual in the boy, a stillness, an almost unsettling gravity. He was named heir, but with that elevation came something no one prepared him for, the complete erosion of privacy. Every decision Marcus made, every military campaign, every judicial ruling was dissected, weaponized, and used against him. Rome had no internet, but it had something equally vicious: the Roman Senate, the mob, and the relentless machinery of political gossip.
He ruled from 1601 AD until his passing in 180 AD. And during those years, Rome was besieged not only by Germanic tribes along the Danube, but by plague, financial crisis, and internal political betrayal. His co-emperor and adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, died unexpectedly. His trusted general, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor in a coup. Even members of his own court conspired against him. And through it all, Marcus Aurelius wrote privately, not for publication, not for legacy. The raw,
unfiltered thoughts of a man wrestling with power, grief, and the relentless judgment of a civilization watching his every breath.
Here is the first Stoic principle that Marcus would have applied to online criticism: the discipline of distinguishing what belongs to you and what does not. In the Meditations, he writes that other people's opinions are not within your control. They live in their own minds, shaped by their own fears, wounds, and delusions. When someone calls you incompetent online, that judgment is a reflection of their inner architecture, not yours. Marcus understood this with cold precision. He did not chase approval because he recognized approval as a variable he could never control. And chasing uncontrollable variables is a form of voluntary suffering.
The second principle is what the Stoics called the view from above, Epictetus. Marcus would visualize himself from a vast cosmic distance, seeing Rome as a small point, himself as an even smaller one, and any criticism directed at him as something so microscopically insignificant in the scope of eternity that it dissolved before it could wound him. Imagine opening your phone, seeing a vicious comment, and then zooming out mentally until the phone, the comment, and the commenter are specks in an infinite universe. This was not escapism for Marcus. It was a rigorous intellectual exercise he practiced daily, like sharpening a blade.
The third principle is radical honesty about one's own character. Marcus writes in Book 4 of the Meditations, and this is devastating in its clarity, that if someone can prove you are wrong, you should be grateful. Not defensive, grateful. Because truth corrected is a gift. Modern social media runs on the fuel of defensiveness. Someone criticizes your work and your nervous system floods with cortisol. Your fingers begin typing. Your ego begins its frantic self-defense campaign. Marcus would have paused. He would have asked the single most disarming question available to any human being. Are they right? That pause is a fortress. The fourth principle strikes even deeper. Marcus was obsessed with the transience of reputation. In his private notes, he returns again and again to the observation that even the most celebrated emperors, Augustus, Trajan, Hadrian, were already being forgotten within generations of their rule. He writes that Alexander the Great and his mule driver ended up in the same place. This was not nihilism. This was liberation. If even the greatest reputations dissolve like morning frost, then what exactly are you defending when you rage against a stranger's tweet? The answer, Marcus would say, is nothing. You are defending a phantom, a social fiction, a temporary arrangement of other people's neurons.
The fifth principle is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated: understanding the origin of cruelty. Marcus Aurelius believed, following Socratic tradition, that no person does harm willingly with full wisdom. When someone attacks you online with venom, they are not demonstrating their strength. They are revealing their suffering. A person at peace does not need to dismantle strangers. A person full of self-respect does not crave the diminishment of others. Marcus would look at his critics not with contempt, but with something more unsettling and more powerful: genuine philosophical pity. He would see not an enemy, but a wound walking in human form.
The sixth principle is the practice of one negative, premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Each morning, Marcus would mentally rehearse the difficult things that could happen that day, not to breed anxiety, but to eliminate the element of shock. In the modern context, imagine waking each morning and quietly acknowledging, today, someone may try to humiliate me publicly. Today, someone may misrepresent my work. Today, someone may call me a fraud. When you have already rehearsed the scenario,
the actual event loses its detonating power. It becomes familiar terrain rather than ambush. The critic fires and finds their target has already been standing in that fire for hours.
The seventh, and perhaps most difficult principle. Marcus Aurelius acted anyway. He did not wait for consensus. He did not wait for approval from the Senate, from the mob, from history. He acted according to his studied understanding of virtue, and then released the outcome. This is perhaps the most radical position available to any person operating in public life. You do the work. You do it with the full force of your integrity. And then you close the laptop. The judgment of the crowd is not your department. Your department is the quality of the action. Everything else, Marcus would say, is noise in a universe that has already moved past caring.
So how does this translate into your daily reality? Begin with what the Stoics called the morning audit. Before you open any social platform, ask yourself a single question with complete honesty. Whose opinion do I actually respect enough to let it alter my course? Write those names down. Yours should be first. Most of the voices that will reach you today belong to people whose judgment you would not trust to run your life for a single day. Once you have that list, apply it like a filter. Everything outside it is signal without authority, sound and fury, as another great thinker once wrote, signifying nothing.
The second practical application is what we might call the Aurelian pause. When you receive criticism that stings, and it will sting because you are human, impose a minimum 12-hour silence before any response. Not because the critic deserves silence, but because your first response in that moment is not yours. It belongs to your wounded ego. Marcus wrote his most cutting philosophical insights not in the heat of political battle, but in the quiet of his tent at the Danube frontier. The quality of thought is directly proportional to the distance from the emotional wound. Wait 12 hours, then decide if a response is even necessary.
The third practical application is reframing criticism as philosophical data. When someone attacks your work, strip the emotion from the content and ask, does this observation, if true, make me better? Marcus Aurelius had senators who despised him, generals who doubted him, and a Roman public that sometimes wanted spectacle he refused to provide. He filtered all of it through this single question. The answer was sometimes yes, and he adapted. More often, the answer was no, and he discarded the noise without drama. Build this habit, and you transform every comment section, every negative review, every hostile colleague into a laboratory where you are the scientist, not the specimen.
There is a story recorded by the historian Cassius Dio about Marcus Aurelius and the traitor Avidius Cassius. When the coup was discovered and Cassius was killed by his own officers before Marcus could reach him, those officers sent Cassius's head to the emperor as a kind of grotesque gift. Marcus refused to look at it. He ordered it buried with dignity. He then granted amnesty to everyone who had supported the rebellion, reportedly saying he was grieved that he had been deprived of the opportunity to forgive them himself. His enemies expected rage. They received philosophy. That choice, dignified restraint at the precise moment when cruelty would have been justified, is the most radical act of power imaginable. What Marcus Aurelius understood at a level most of us will spend our entire lives approaching is that reputation is not the same as character. Reputation is what others decide you are, a collective hallucination assembled from their projections, biases, and incomplete information. Character is what you are in the dark, when no one is watching, when the comment section is closed and the phone is face down, and there is nothing left but you and your choices.
He protected his character with iron discipline. He allowed his reputation to be whatever Rome needed it to be. And at the end of his life, riding alone by lamplight, he was still asking himself how to be better. That is the answer.
We began with a question about crumbling, about the people who let strangers on the internet decide who they are. Here is the concrete framework the world's most scrutinized emperor used to remain unshaken. Distinguish what is yours from what is not. Zoom out to cosmic perspective. Ask if your critic is right before defending yourself. Remember that all reputations dissolve. Understand that cruelty is always a wound expressing itself. Rehearse adversity every morning, and then act from virtue and release the outcome. Marcus Aurelius did not survive Rome's judgment. He transcended the very concept of needing to survive it. That distinction is everything. That distinction is yours.
You are trading the irreplaceable hours of your finite existence for numbers on a digital screen, terrified that one market crash will erase your worth. Modern society has engineered an invisible cage of financial anxiety, forcing you to sprint tirelessly on a treadmill of perpetual debt and hollow consumption. But the ancient Stoics understood a dangerous truth about wealth. Money does not cure poverty, it merely changes its symptoms. In this video, you will discover the exact mental framework Seneca used to remain completely untethered to his immense riches, allowing you to conquer your modern financial panic forever.
To understand this remedy, we must look to Lucius Annaeus Seneca, a man who navigated the treacherous political waters of first-century Rome. Seneca was not a monk living in poverty. He was an imperial advisor and one of the wealthiest men in the entire Roman Empire. Yet, he lived under the constant, terrifying shadow of the erratic Emperor Nero. Seneca knew that at any unpredictable moment, a single imperial decree could strip him of his estates, his vast fortunes, and, inevitably, his freedom. He existed on a precipice where unimaginable wealth met unimaginable instability.
Surrounded by extreme opulence and the perpetual threat of absolute ruin, Seneca realized a profound psychological law. He observed that those clinging tightest to their gold were the ones suffocating under its weight. The Roman elite were perpetually terrified, their minds held hostage by the fear of losing their status. Seneca recognized that true poverty is not having too little, but desperately wanting more. He saw that financial anxiety is not a mathematics problem about bank accounts, but a philosophical crisis about attachment. Thus, he developed a radical practice to inoculate his mind against material loss.
The foundation of the Stoic defense against financial dread is the dichotomy of control. Epictetus taught that we must relentlessly separate what is ours from what is not. Inflation rates, stock market fluctuations, corporate layoffs, and housing prices belong entirely to the unpredictable winds of fortune. They are external variables indifferent to your anxiety. When you bind your inner peace to the trajectory of a stock portfolio or the digits in a savings account, you surrender the sovereignty of your mind to chaos. You volunteer to be a slave to economic weather you cannot command.
We mistakenly believe that acquiring more wealth will eventually purchase our peace of mind. We tell ourselves that just one more raise, one more successful investment, or one more safety net will finally extinguish the burning anxiety in our chests. But the Stoics viewed wealth as a wild beast. If you do not learn to tame your desires when you have little,
Having abundance will only give you more territory to defend. Financial peace is never achieved by hoarding external resources. It is solely cultivated by aggressively reducing your internal requirements. True wealth is self-sufficiency.
Seneca practiced a deliberate exercise called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. While modern self-help gurus preach toxic positivity and manifesting riches, the Stoics practiced the exact opposite. They visualized total financial ruin. Seneca would intentionally set aside a few days each month to live on the cheapest food, wear rough, ragged clothing, and sleep on a hard floor. He did not do this to punish himself, but to look his deepest financial fears directly in the eye and ask, is this the condition that I have feared so intensely all along?
By physically experiencing the absolute worst-case scenario, Seneca dismantled the psychological power of poverty. The terror of going broke is always worse in our imagination than in reality. When you realize that you can survive, adapt, and even find moments of stillness with absolutely nothing in your pockets, the invisible chains of financial anxiety suddenly shatter. You stop making decisions based on the fear of scarcity. You stop tolerating a miserable career just to fund a lifestyle you do not even enjoy. You reclaim your autonomy from the tyrannical grip of money.
We must also examine our definition of ownership. The Stoics believed that you do not actually own your money, your car, or your home. You are merely renting these things from fortune, and the lease can be revoked without a moment's notice. Wealth is a preferred indifferent. It is acceptable to have it, but it is a catastrophic error to need it. If your identity is wrapped tightly around your net worth, a market crash will not just erase your funds, it will completely obliterate your sense of self and plunge you into despair. The relentless pursuit of wealth forces you to live constantly in the future, sacrificing the present moment for a delayed sanctuary that may never arrive. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that a man can only ever lose the present moment, for it is the only thing he truly possesses. Financial anxiety is the theft of today by the ghosts of tomorrow. When you are consumed by the fear of future ruin, you are failing to inhabit the life you are currently living. The Stoic anchors himself firmly in the immediate present, managing only what is right in front of him. Consider the immense cognitive load that financial anxiety demands. It drains your focus, saps your energy, and compromises your moral integrity. Men will compromise their deepest values, betray their friends, and destroy their own health merely to accumulate slightly more currency. But Epictetus would ask, at what price are you selling your tranquility? If you gain a fortune, but lose your character and your peace of mind, you have made a terrible transaction. True wealth is an unshakable character, a fortress of inner resilience that no economic depression can ever breach or diminish.
To deploy this ancient wisdom in our hyper-connected modern world, you must fundamentally change your relationship with consumption. Start by practicing voluntary discomfort this week. Eat the simplest, cheapest meal you can prepare. Walk instead of driving. Wear your oldest, plainest clothes. Strip away the luxurious padding of your daily existence and observe your mind. You will quickly discover that the body requires very little to be sustained, and the soul requires absolutely nothing material to be content. This simple physical practice builds an impregnable psychological shield against the modern terror of economic collapse.
Next, sever your emotional attachment to the uncontrollable metrics of wealth. Stop obsessively checking your bank balance
finance, your investment portfolios, or your credit score. Once you have established a rational plan for your finances, step away from the noise. Understand that every time you refresh those numbers with a trembling hand, you are reinforcing the false belief that your safety is tied to external algorithms. Instead, invest your primary energy into cultivating skills, wisdom, and resilience. These are the only true assets that cannot be inflated away, taxed by the government, or stolen by thieves. Finally, practice the art of negative visualization regarding your current lifestyle. Look around your home and acknowledge that every single item you own is temporary. Mentally practice losing your job, losing your home, and starting over from absolute zero. If you systematically trace your fear down to its roots, you will find that the monster hiding in the dark is quite small. You have survived every bad day of your life thus far. Your mind is an adaptable survival mechanism. You are entirely capable of finding meaning and purpose, even in the depths of financial ruin.
There is a powerful historical account of Zeno of Citium, the very founder of the Stoic school. Before he was a philosopher, Zeno was a very wealthy merchant who traded rare purple dyes. He had invested his entire fortune into a massive cargo shipment. During a treacherous voyage, a brutal storm struck the sea, and his ship was entirely destroyed. In a single devastating moment, Zeno lost everything he had ever worked for. He was violently thrown from the peak of extreme wealth to the absolute bottom of poverty, stranded with nothing but his own breath.
But Zeno did not collapse into despair. He did not curse the gods or surrender to the crushing weight of financial anxiety. Instead, he made his way to Athens, walked into a bookstore, and discovered the teachings of Socrates. Reflecting upon his devastating loss, Zeno famously declared, "Fortune has smiled upon me, for she has driven me to the study of philosophy." He realized that the destruction of his material wealth was the exact catalyst required to build his invincible inner wealth. The storm did not ruin his life. It freed him from the burden of his cargo.
The exact technique Seneca used to remain stress-free amid a crumbling empire was the realization that true wealth is not the abundance of possessions, but the poverty of desires. If you practice voluntary discomfort and mentally prepare for ruin, you strip fortune of its power to terrorize you. You no longer need the market to stay green to feel secure. The economy will crash, jobs will vanish, and fortunes will inevitably burn. But when you build your foundation upon unshakable character rather than fragile currency, you become entirely untouchable. Master your desires, and you will forever master your will. Most people believe freedom means doing whatever they want, whenever they want. They are wrong. And deep down, they sense it. Every morning you wake up and choose the easier path, a part of you grows smaller. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact mental architecture Marcus Aurelius built to transform rigid discipline into the purest form of human liberation ever recorded in history.
Marcus Aurelius was born in 121 AD into Roman aristocracy, but comfort never softened him. At 17, he was adopted by Emperor Antoninus Pius and groomed for absolute power. He did not ask for the throne. When he finally received it in 161 AD, he immediately shared authority with his adoptive brother. Power arrived, and his first act was restraint. That tells you everything.
His reign lasted 19 years, and they were brutal. Plagues swept the empire, killing millions. Germanic tribes pressed relentlessly against the northern borders. Betrayal came from within his own court. He governed during catastrophe, without the luxury of calm. The Meditations, his private journal, was never meant to be read. It was a man talking himself back from the edge, daily. Here is what most people misunderstand about Stoic discipline. It was never about punishment. It was never about denying yourself joy or grinding yourself into numbness. Marcus understood something far more radical. The undisciplined mind is a prison with invisible bars. Every craving you obey, every discomfort you flee, every impulse you surrender to, each one quietly removes a degree of your sovereignty. He wrote in Book 5 of the Meditations, "On those mornings you struggle to rise, let this thought be present. I am rising to do the work of a human being." This is not motivation. This is something older and harder. It is the recognition that your nature has a direction, and discipline is simply the act of moving in that direction rather than against it. Resistance to your nature is the real suffering.
Marcus practiced what Stoics called the discipline of desire. Not the elimination of desire, but its refinement. He taught himself to want only what was within his power. External outcomes, public approval, even his own health, these he held loosely. What he gripped with both hands was his response, his attention, his effort. And in that single distinction lived an enormous, unassailable freedom that no plague or war could dissolve.
There is a concept in Stoic philosophy called the inner citadel, described with force by Marcus in the Meditations. The premise? Your rational mind is a fortress. External events are siege weapons. They can surround you, press against your walls, shake your foundations. But they can only enter if you open the gate from within. Discipline was how Marcus kept that gate sealed, even when everything outside was falling apart.
Most people think willpower is a finite resource you spend. Marcus thought differently. He understood that discipline, practiced consistently, becomes identity. You do not spend it, you become it. A man who has trained himself to wake at dawn does not fight the alarm. A man who has practiced silence in anger does not battle the impulse. The war is won long before the battle begins. Virtue, practiced, becomes character.
He understood the paradox that confuses almost everyone. Absolute freedom is not the absence of structure. It is the presence of chosen structure. A river without banks is a swamp. It goes nowhere. It becomes stagnant. Banks do not imprison a river. They give it direction, velocity, and purpose. Marcus chose his banks deliberately through philosophical practice, physical routine, and the relentless examination of his own thoughts each single morning. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But read carefully. He did not write happiness. He wrote strength. Marcus was not selling comfort. He was selling something far more valuable. He was describing the deep, quiet, unshakable sense of self that emerges when a human being stops outsourcing their inner state to the weather of external circumstance. That is the real prize. Now consider how this applies to your life. Begin with the morning. Marcus called it the first battle. The moment between sleep and rising is a microcosm of every discipline you will exercise that day. Do not negotiate with comfort at dawn. The version of you who rises immediately and purposefully carries that momentum into every subsequent hour. The version who bargains with softness has already made 1,000 small surrenders before breakfast.
Second application. Create what Marcus called the evening examination. Before sleep, ask 3 questions with total honesty. What did I do today that aligned with my values? Where did I surrender to impulse or distraction? What single practice will I strengthen tomorrow? This is not self-flagellation. This is calibration. A ship without a navigator drifts. The evening examination is how Marcus navigated himself back to his philosophical north every single night.
Third application, the discipline of speech. Marcus wrote extensively about restraint in language. Before speaking, he imposed a delay, not from cowardice, but from respect for truth. Most suffering in human relationships comes from words spoken in the heat of unexamined emotion. Practice the pause. Make it 3 breaths. In those 3 breaths lies the entire difference between a reaction that diminishes you and a response that honors your deepest values.
Near the end of his life, Marcus faced his most intimate test. His son Commodus was becoming everything he had tried not to be: impulsive, vain, cruel. Marcus could not control his son's character. He had poured philosophy into him, offered example after example, disciplined himself in full view as a living demonstration. And still, the boy chose differently. Marcus continued governing. He did not collapse. He had never built his peace on outcomes he could not control.
In his final campaign on the Danube frontier in 180 AD, sick and exhausted, Marcus Aurelius continued his philosophical writing. Soldiers reported that he rose before dawn regardless. He never stopped examining himself. He never traded his inner architecture for temporary comfort. His final meditations contain no bitterness. There is only the quiet voice of a man who chose himself completely, every day, until there were no days left. That is the inner citadel fully realized.
Here is what Marcus Aurelius actually discovered, and what you came here to understand. Discipline does not restrict your freedom. It constructs it. Every impulse you govern creates 1 degree more of sovereignty. Every morning you choose purpose over comfort, you expand the walls of your inner citadel by exactly 1 stone. Freedom is not given. It is built, slowly, daily, in the private space between stimulus and response. That space is everything. Guard it with your... You walk into a room and no one turns. You speak and the words dissolve like smoke. You send the message, do the work, offer the gesture, and silence answers you. This isn't loneliness. It's something sharper. The specific ache of being present and unseen. The cost of staying here is not just pain, it's the slow erosion of your will. But what if invisibility is not a wound? What if it's an initiation? 2,000 years ago, Epictetus, a man who began life as a literal slave, already knew exactly why being ignored might be the most powerful position you'll ever occupy. We will move through 3 territories tonight. First, the anatomy of invisibility, what it actually does to the soul, and why most people misread it entirely. Second, the Stoic philosophy that transforms being ignored from a verdict into a forge. Third, the practical discipline, what you do with your hands and your mind on the days nobody sees you. But the revelation that closes this, the thing Epictetus said in chains, will reframe everything that came before it. There is a particular quality to being ignored that ordinary loneliness does not carry. Loneliness is about absence. Invisibility is about presence without acknowledgement. You are there, fully there, and the world performs its indifference with almost surgical precision. A colleague takes credit for your work. A conversation reshapes itself around a gap where your voice should be. The people you love most look through you as though you were furniture. This is the wound. Not that you don't exist, but that your existence registers as irrelevant. The psychological damage compounds quietly. Neuroscience and ancient philosophy agree on this, if nothing else. Sustained social invisibility mimics the same neural signature as physical pain. The brain does not distinguish cleanly between a broken arm and a broken sense of worth. And so you begin to adapt. You shrink your opinions. You perform louder versions of yourself, hoping to be registered. You become, slowly, imperceptibly, someone you would not recognize in calmer waters. The tragedy is not the original wound. It's what you build around it. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Every great Stoic philosopher was, at a defining moment in his life, profoundly invisible. Marcus Aurelius spent years as a reluctant heir, deliberately overlooked by the court of Hadrian, writing philosophy in margins that no one was supposed to read. Seneca was exiled to Corsica for 8 years, erased from Rome's conversation entirely. Epictetus spent his early decades as property, legally voiceless. Their invisibility was not incidental. It was the condition inside which their philosophy crystallized. What they forged there became the foundation of Western inner life. Epictetus opens the Enchiridion, his foundational manual, with a distinction that sounds almost too simple until you sit with it long enough to feel its full weight. He writes, "Some things are in our control, and others not." The Greek term is the dichotomy of control. Your reputation, other people's perception, whether you are seen or celebrated, these are externals, what Epictetus calls ta ektos. They are, by Stoic definition, indifferent, adiaphora, not worthless, but not yours. Your judgment, your values, your response to invisibility, these are yours entirely. This is the first cut of the Stoic scalpel. Here is the deepest paradox Stoicism offers. The person who does not need to be seen is the most powerful person in any room. The Stoics called this apatheia, not the modern word apathy, which implies indifference born of defeat, but a disciplined freedom from the passions that make external validation feel like oxygen. When you no longer need the room to turn when you enter, the room loses its authority over you. Your hegemonicon, your ruling faculty, the commanding center of the soul, remains sovereign. And sovereignty is incompatible with invisibility as a wound. If this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next matters even more. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the most powerful empire on earth, wrote privately in his Meditations, Book 6, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was not writing for posterity,
No audience was ever intended. He was practicing prosoche, vigilant attention to the internal landscape, the ongoing self-examination that kept his hegemonicon intact. Here was the most visible man alive, writing as though no one would ever read him. That discipline, the act of doing deep work for its own integrity, is the Stoic antidote to invisibility.
Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, written from retirement, deliberately withdrawn from Rome's noise, articulates what he calls the gift of withdrawal. Recede in te ipse. Retire into yourself. When the world ignores you, he argues, it has accidentally handed you the rarest commodity in Roman public life, time, uncontested by performance. Invisibility, Seneca insists, is the fertile soil of philosophy. The man who must be seen at every banquet, praised at every forum, is a man whose interiority starves. The man nobody watches is free to become someone magnificent in private.
Wait, what comes next is what few who study Stoicism truly understand. Being ignored is not merely tolerable within the Stoic framework. It is, in precise technical terms, an opportunity to practice what Marcus Aurelius called amor fati, love of fate. Not passive resignation, that is the counterfeit. Amor fati is the active, chosen embrace of exactly what is. The Stoic does not merely accept invisibility, he minds it. He asks, what does my logos, my capacity for rational alignment with cosmic reason, demand of me in this exact condition? That question transforms humiliation into instruction.
Tomorrow, when the silence greets you again, do not fill it with performance. Instead, begin the practice the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, deliberate premeditation of adversity. Each morning, acknowledge this. Today, I may be ignored. Today, my work may go unrecognized. Today, the room may not turn. Then ask, explicitly, in writing if possible, what virtue does this day require of me regardless of who is watching? Epictetus taught his students to ask, not what did they think, but did I act in accordance with my best nature? That internal tribunal is the only one that governs arete.
The second practice is what Musonius Rufus, the Roman Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus himself, called the discipline of action without audience. Musonius argued that virtue practiced in public is always slightly corrupted by the gaze of witnesses. True character is revealed in what you do when no recognition is possible. He required his students to perform acts of integrity in absolute obscurity, anonymous generosity, private study, labor that left no record. The logic is precise. If your goodness depends on being seen, it is not goodness. It is theater. Strip the audience away. What remains is your actual character. The third practice is memento mori, applied to recognition itself. Remember, the applause of any given era is temporary. Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism in 301 BCE in the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch in Athens, was ignored, then ridiculed, then tolerated, then celebrated, then ignored again across centuries. The verdict of your moment is not the verdict of your life, and the verdict of your life is not the verdict of your worth. Marcus Aurelius buried 3 of his own children and continued his daily philosophical practice. Grief, invisibility, loss, each was raw material, never final judgment. In 65 CE, Seneca, received a message from Emperor Nero. He was ordered to take his own life. His final hours, recorded by Tacitus in the Annals, are almost unbearably illuminating. Surrounded by weeping friends, Seneca remained composed. He dictated philosophy until the end. He had spent decades preparing for exactly this, the moment when the world's verdict and his internal standard would face each other directly. He had written in Letter 77, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." His invisibility to Nero's empire became his immortality in ours. Here, then, is the revelation promised at the opening. The Stoic power of being ignored is not that invisibility stops hurting. It does not. The dichotomy of control does not anesthetize pain. It reclassifies it. The ache of not being seen remains real. What changes is its jurisdiction. It moves from the hegemonikon, your sovereign faculty, into the category of ta ektos, the externals, the indifferent, the things that do not own you. You stop building your identity on a foundation that other people's attention controls. What you build on what remains is indestructible. This is not a consolation. This is a philosophy, a complete architecture for a life.
Epictetus, who was once ignored because he was property, became the most quoted philosopher of the Roman imperial court. Not because he sought recognition, because he refused to let its absence diminish him. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we explore what Marcus Aurelius wrote each night before sleep and why it changes everything. The bell ensures you don't miss it. One final question to carry into your silence. If no one ever acknowledged your deepest work, would it still be worth doing?
It's 6 a.m. Your eyes open before the alarm. Already, before a single word is spoken, the weight arrives. A conversation you can't resolve, a future you can't predict, a version of yourself you're afraid you'll never become. This is not weakness. This is the oldest war in human history, the war inside the mind. And if you stay unarmed, it will cost you everything. Your clarity, your relationships, your years. What if the weapon already exists? Seneca knew it. 2,000 years ago, he forged it in writing. Stay with me. The technique at the end of this video will change your mornings permanently. We will move through 3 territories this morning. First, we name the true nature of anxiety. Not what popular culture tells you, but what the Stoics discovered at its biological and philosophical root. Second, we go deep into the Stoic armory. Specific doctrines, specific names, specific ancient words that carry surgical precision. Third, we build your morning practice, brick by brick. But the real revelation, the one Seneca buried inside a letter he wrote the night before his death, comes at the very end. Anxiety is not a modern invention. It is not caused by social media, traffic, or your inbox. Strip those away, and the creature remains. The ancient Stoics called it teraki, inner turbulence, and they located its source not in the world, but in the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the soul. Your mind generates fear not because danger is present, but because your faculty of judgment has been left untrained, unguarded, open to every passing impression, like a wound left to the weather. Here is what makes this urgent. Every morning you wake up, your hegemonikon is at its most vulnerable. Neuroscience and Stoic philosophy agree on this exact point. The cortisol spike at dawn, what scientists now call the cortisol awakening response, primes your nervous system for threat detection. The Stoics did not have that term, but Marcus Aurelius wrote, in Book 2 of his Meditations, "When you wake, say to yourself, I will meet today with interference, ingratitude, insolence." He was describing the same biological reality and arming himself against it.
The wound runs deeper still. Modern anxiety thrives because we have been taught, implicitly, culturally, that control is possible. That if we plan enough, worry enough, rehearse enough disaster in our minds, we will somehow prevent it. This is the catastrophic error. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery and had his leg deliberately broken by his master Epaphroditus, named this error precisely: the failure to respect the dichotomy of control. We exhaust ourselves governing what cannot be governed. We abandon what is entirely ours.
But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. What if anxiety, your anxiety, the specific version that grips you at 6 a.m., is not a flaw in your character, but a failure of your philosophy? Not a medical problem first, a conceptual one. Epictetus, teaching in Nicopolis around 100 CE, told his students something that still reverberates. Men are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things. That single sentence is a scalpel. It does not comfort you. It cuts through the false premise that the world is doing this to you.
This is the core Stoic doctrine on anxiety. Your impressions, phantasiae in Greek, arrive unbidden. You cannot stop them. But the faculty of assent, what the Stoics called synkatathis, is entirely yours. You choose whether to endorse the impression. You choose whether to treat the anxious thought as truth. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with extraordinary discipline every single morning. He called it prosoche, vigilant attention to what the ruling mind accepts. Not passive observation, active, martial, philosophical surveillance of the self's interior gates. If this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next reaches even deeper into the Stoic armory. Now, the doctrine of premeditatio malorum. Seneca prescribed it in Letter 91. Before the day begins, you deliberately envision what could go wrong. Not to despair, but to strip the event of its power to shock. Omnia lucili aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is foreign to us, Lucilius. Time alone is ours. Anxiety feeds on surprise. Premeditatio malorum starves it. You have already been there. The ambush cannot wound you. There is a second doctrine the Stoics wielded against inner turbulence. Amor fati, love of fate. Not passive acceptance, not resignation. Marcus Aurelius made this distinction ferociously clear. To love what comes is not to stop striving. It is to refuse to corrupt the present moment with the poison of wishing it were otherwise. Anxiety is, at its core, the refusal of what is. Every anxious thought is a small rebellion against logos, the rational order that governs all things. When you practice amor fati, you stop fighting reality. You fight for your response to it. Wait. What comes next is what few people who study Stoicism ever truly understand. The Stoics did not prescribe tranquility as the goal. They prescribed apatheia, a precise Greek term meaning freedom from the grip of disordered passion. Not numbness, not the absence of feeling. Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism around 300 BCE in Athens after a shipwreck left him penniless on a foreign shore, taught that the sage still experiences what he called eupatheiai, good emotional states, joy, caution, willing. Anxiety is a disordered passion. Joy rooted in virtue is not. Tomorrow morning, before you speak a single word to another human being, do this. Sit. Breathe 3 deliberate breaths, not to relax, but to signal to your hegemonicon that it is now the commander, not the prisoner. Then speak these words aloud or in writing. What this morning is inside my control? What is outside it? Write 2 lists. Be brutal. Be specific. Everything on the second list, release it from the court of your judgment. This is not metaphor. This is philosophy functioning as daily operational protocol. Epictetus called this the fundamental practice of the school. After the 2 lists, perform premeditatio malorum for exactly 3 minutes. Speak aloud the realistic difficulties the day may bring, a difficult conversation, an unpredictable outcome, your own possible failure. Then for each one, ask, if this occurs, what virtue does it require of me? Courage? Patience? Honest? Name the virtue. The Stoics believed, Musonius Rufus wrote this explicitly, that virtue is not a trait you possess. It is an act you perform, repeatedly, especially when the impressions arriving at dawn are dark and threatening. Finally, close your morning practice with a single sentence from Marcus Aurelius, not for comfort, but for orientation. Book 5, Meditations. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Speak it as a command, not a hope. Then stand. Move. The Stoics were not contemplatives who stayed in their libraries. Marcus governed an empire. Epictetus taught hundreds. Seneca advised emperors. Philosophy was their weapon precisely because they carried it into the chaos, not away from it.
In 65 CE, Nero ordered Seneca to die. Seneca was 69 years old. He had spent 40 years writing about how to face exactly this moment. His friends wept. His wife attempted to die with him. According to Tacitus, writing in his Annals, Seneca turned to his companions and said, "Where are the maxims of your philosophy? Where is the reason that we prepared against coming evils?" He was not performing courage. He was executing a practice he had rehearsed every single morning for decades. Premeditatio malorum. The morning ritual had built the man who could die without trembling.
This is the technique promised at the start. It is not a breathing app, not a mantra. It is a philosophy, tested in slavery, in exile, in the courts of emperors, and in the moment of death. Every morning, you are Seneca before the order comes. You have time now to build what he built. The anxious mind is not your enemy. It is an untrained soldier. Stoic practice is the training. Not once, not occasionally. Every single morning, before the world speaks first.
The shield Seneca forged was built one morning at a time. So is yours. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow, we explore what Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal each night before sleep, and why it may be even more powerful than the morning. The bell ensures you do not miss it. Now, what will you place on your list of what you control today? You're in the room. People are talking, laughing, performing. And you feel it, that invisible pull to prove yourself, to be louder, sharper, more impressive. You give in. Later, alone, something hollow lingers. You said too much, revealed too much. The cost of that hunger for approval is quiet, but devastating. What if the most magnetic thing you can become requires saying almost nothing at all? 2,000 years ago, Epictetus already knew exactly why you keep losing your power. We'll explore 3 things. First, why the hunger for approval is the root of all social weakness. Then, the Stoic discipline of silence and self-command that transforms how others perceive you. Finally, what true inner authority looks like and why it radiates outward without effort. But the real revelation, the discipline that binds all 3, comes at the very end. What you discover there will permanently alter how you move through every room. Here is the wound most people carry without naming it. They need the room to confirm they exist. Every glance, every laugh at their joke, every nod of agreement becomes evidence they matter. Epictetus called this the most dangerous form of slavery, surrendering your hegemonikon, your ruling faculty, to the judgment of strangers. When your inner world is governed by external reaction, you are not free. You are performing. And the audience always senses the desperation behind the performance. Watch what happens in any gathering. The person who speaks first, loudest, most often, they are not commanding the room. They are begging it. The words are plentiful, but weightless. People listen politely and move on. Meanwhile, someone else sits quietly, speaks rarely, and when they do, the room shifts. Heads turn. Conversations pause. That person has something the loud one sacrifices with every anxious word. Gravity. Gravity is not performed. It is preserved through restraint.
Seneca wrote in his letters to Lucilius, and these were not abstract philosophy, they were urgent dispatches. Every time you step outside, beware. The crowd will contaminate you. He meant this precisely. Every unnecessary conversation, every performance of wit, every opinion offered without invitation costs something, invisible but irreplaceable, your inner coherence. The Stoics called the preservation of that coherence prosoche, vigilant attention to the self. Without it, the self scatters, and scattered men are never respected. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Most people hear silence and restraint and picture a cold, closed-off person, someone who withholds warmth, builds walls, wins respect through intimidation. That is not the Stoic ideal at all. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded the Roman Empire for nearly 2 decades, was described by those around him as genuinely warm, deeply attentive, and profoundly interested in others. His restraint was not distance, it was discipline. There is an enormous difference. The Stoic discipline at the heart of this is called apatheia, and it is chronically misunderstood. It does not mean indifference to life. It means freedom from irrational passion,
from the reactive emotional storms that make a person unpredictable and therefore unsafe. When you achieve apatheia, you become consistent. People always know what they are getting with you. Consistency is the foundation of trust. Trust is the foundation of respect. Respect, sustained over time, is what the world calls irresistible. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 5 of his Meditations, his private journal, never intended for publication, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the dichotomy of control that Epictetus built his entire philosophy upon. What is yours? Judgment, intention, response. What is not? Others' opinions, outcomes, the room's reaction. When you stop fighting for what was never yours, your energy consolidates. Consolidated energy is what others feel when you enter.
And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next cuts even deeper into the ancient source of personal power. Consider what the Stoics called officium, duty. Not duty as obligation imposed from outside, but duty as the natural expression of who you have chosen to become. When a person operates from clear duty, toward excellence, toward virtue, toward the people they genuinely love, their actions carry a quality that others cannot quite name, but deeply feel. It reads as integrity. Integrity draws people in without trying. Wait. What comes next is what few truly understand about Stoic self-mastery. Most self-improvement content tells you to project confidence, to optimize your body language, to craft a personal brand. The Stoics would find this almost comical. Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism in Athens around 300 BCE while teaching in the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, said simply, "Live according to nature." Your nature includes logos, cosmic reason, the rational principle that connects you to the universe's own structure. Align with logos. Nothing else is needed.
Here is the practice. Tomorrow morning, before you speak a single word, pause. Epictetus taught that between impulse and action, there is a sacred space, the space where your hegemonicon, your ruling faculty, governs. In that space, ask one question. Does this word serve virtue, or does it serve my need for approval? If the answer is the latter, withhold it. Do this for 1 week. You will find your words become fewer, heavier, and more astonishing in their effect on others. Second practice. Practice premeditatio malorum, Seneca's method of deliberately imagining difficulty before it arrives. Each evening, sit with 5 minutes of uninterrupted silence. Ask, what could go wrong tomorrow? What slight might I receive? What temptation to react, to defend, to perform? Rehearse your measured response in advance. This is not pessimism. It is fortification. The person who has already faced their fears in imagination is unmoved when those fears appear in reality. Unmoved people are perceived as powerful. Third practice. Cultivate selective speech. The Roman Stoic Musonius Rufus, less famous than Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, but arguably their equal in rigor, instructed his students to speak only when silence would be inferior. Consider that standard. Not when you feel like speaking, not when you want to be heard. Only when silence itself would be the lesser choice.
Applied daily, this discipline restructures your relationship with attention. You stop needing it. And the moment you stop needing it, you begin to command it.
In 161 CE, Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome at age 40. He had spent 20 years preparing, studying, practicing, failing privately, refining his character in relative obscurity. When power finally arrived, contemporaries noted something extraordinary. He did not change. The same man who had written quietly in his journal continued writing quietly as emperor. Same temperament, same discipline, same measured speech. Cassius Dio, the historian, recorded that soldiers loved him not for speeches, but for his unmistakable steadiness. That steadiness was the product of decades of prosoche, vigilant, daily self-attention.
The discipline you have been building toward is this: the complete withdrawal of your self-worth from external confirmation. The Stoics called externals adiaphora, indifferent things, not evil, not worthless, simply not the ground of your identity. When you no longer need the room's approval to feel whole, you stop performing. And when you stop performing, something ancient and genuine emerges, a presence others cannot manufacture or fake. That is what Epictetus promised. That is the discipline, and the room will feel it before you say a single word. Everything begins here: the quiet withdrawal of approval seeking, the daily practice of prosoche, the courage to let silence speak first. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into what Marcus Aurelius wrote each night before sleep. The bell ensures you don't miss it. Ask yourself now, what would you become if the only approval you ever needed was your... Most people spend their entire lives wondering why what they desire keeps escaping them, not realizing the obstacle is woven into their daily behavior. There are exactly 6 habits that silently repel everything you want: wealth, clarity, respect, purpose, deep connection. And number 6, almost no one recognizes it, yet it is the most destructive of all. Pay close attention. Number 1, the habit of consuming without creating. Marcus Aurelius, writing alone in his military tent on the Danube frontier around 170 AD, never intended his meditations for public eyes. He wrote to forge himself, not to be seen writing. Today, most people absorb endlessly. Content, opinions, news, other lives. Consumption without creation atrophies the hegemonicon, the ruling faculty of the soul, leaving it passive, directionless, attracting nothing of worth.
The Stoics called the ruling faculty the hegemonicon, the internal governor that shapes every impression, every judgment, every action. When you only consume, you hand that governor over to external forces. You let algorithms, crowds, and noise steer you. The remedy is ruthless. Create something daily. A written reflection, a disciplined practice, a constructed argument. Creation is the act by which the soul reclaims authority over itself and signals to the world its seriousness. Number 2, the habit of seeking approval before acting. Epictetus, born a slave in Hierapolis in the 1st century AD, owning nothing except the clarity of his mind, taught one foundational principle: the dichotomy of control. What lies within your power is your judgment, your intention, your effort. What lies outside is every other person's opinion. The moment you require external approval before moving, you place your engine of desire in someone else's hands.
This habit is insidious because it disguises itself as humility or caution. But Epictetus was unsparing. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. Waiting for applause before beginning is not humility. It is the abdication of arete, of virtue. Act first, refine after. The world rewards the one who moves without permission.
Number 3. The habit of living inside complaint. Seneca, writing from his villa in Nomentum around 62 AD, identified a corrosive pattern in the men around him, men of considerable talent who spent their hours cataloging grievances rather than cultivating judgment. It is not the man who has little, but the man who craves more that is poor, he wrote. Complaint is the ritual by which we rehearse helplessness and teach our minds to perceive the world as hostile and closed.
Every complaint is a quiet declaration. I am subject to what happens outside me. The Stoic alternative is not optimistic denial. It is prosoche, vigilant attention to the internal narrative you construct around events. Seneca practiced premeditatio malorum, anticipating adversity with precision, not to complain about it in advance, but to strip it of its power to surprise and destabilize. And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next matters even more.
Number 4. The habit of confusing motion with progress. The ancient Stoics distinguished sharply between preferred indifference, health, wealth, status, and genuine goods, which are exclusively virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. Most people pursue the former with frantic activity while neglecting the latter entirely. They are busy. They are not building. Busyness becomes a psychological shield, evidence offered to oneself that one is deserving, without the discipline of actually becoming so.
Musonius Rufus, the Roman Socrates, teaching in Rome during Nero's reign, argued that philosophy without practice is theater. He assigned his students physical labor alongside philosophical reasoning, insisting that virtue must be embodied, not merely contemplated. The discipline you need is simple and severe. End each day asking not, "How much did I do?" but how much of what I did moved me closer to the person capable of holding what I desire. Motion without direction is exhaustion dressed as ambition.
Number 5. The habit of treating desire as a destination rather than a direction. Here lies one of Stoicism's most precise and misunderstood insights. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 5 of the Meditations, "Confine yourself to the present," not as a passive surrender, but as an act of strategic focus. Desire projected entirely into a future outcome creates what the Stoics called false dependency on externals, adiaphora, indifferent things, and corrodes the present judgment needed to reach them.
The ancient Stoics embraced amor fati, not merely accepting fate, but actively willing it, finding in each present circumstance the material for virtue. When desire becomes a destination, Failure to arrive produces despair. When desire becomes a direction, a compass orientation, every present moment becomes a legitimate step. The person who acts virtuously toward their goal today is already, in the Stoic sense, succeeding. The future arrival is a preferred indifferent. The present effort is the only genuine good.
Number 6. The one almost no one recognizes, the most subtle and most destructive habit of all. The habit of living without a defined philosophy of the self. Not a religion borrowed wholesale, not a set of productivity rules. A genuine, examined, personal doctrine, a logos, a coherent account of what you believe, what you will not compromise, and what standard you hold yourself to in private when no audience remains. Without this, desire has no gravitational center. Zeno of Citium founded Stoicism in Athens around 300 BC, not in a grand academy, but in a painted porch, the Stoa Poikile, teaching to anyone who would listen. His central claim was radical. The good life is not discovered by accumulating experiences. It is constructed through logos, through reason applied consistently to oneself. A person without a living philosophy is not neutral. They are governed by the unexamined philosophies of whoever spoke to them last. That is a catastrophic inheritance.
Without an examined logos, a personal philosophical doctrine, every external desire you pursue is borrowed from another person's imagination of what your life should be. Chrysippus, the third head of the Stoic school, argued that all vice originates in mistaken judgment about what is genuinely good. A person who has never interrogated their own value system is perpetually making those mistakes. They attract experiences consistent with that confusion. The law is precise. Unclear premises produce incoherent outcomes. The remedy for habit 6, and for all 6, is not a single dramatic gesture. It is daily prosoko, vigilant, disciplined attention to your own ruling faculty. Write your doctrine. Test it against adversity. Revise it with honesty. Epictetus reminded us, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. That sequence, identity before action, is the axis on which everything turns. The soul that knows itself clearly becomes a field, not a fog. 6 habits, 1 consequence, a life spent circling what you desire without ever inhabiting it. The Stoics did not promise comfort. They promised coherence. Begin with your hegemonicon. Reclaim it from consumption, from approval-seeking, from complaint, from false motion, from destination worship, from philosophical vacancy. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into Stoic self-discipline and the practice of evening examination. The bell ensures you miss nothing. Now ask yourself, what am I actually governing? Most people spend their entire lives reacting to those who despise them, defending, explaining, collapsing inward. But the Stoics discovered something devastating in its precision. Your contempt for contempt is the only weapon that matters. There are exactly 7 attitudes that make those who hate you tremble in silence. And number 7 is so rare that almost no one in the modern world has ever cultivated it. Listen carefully. Number 1, absolute indifference to their verdict. Epictetus, born a slave in Hierapolis around 50 AD, was beaten, owned, humiliated,
and yet he became one of the most formidable minds antiquity ever produced. His first principle was ruthless. Some things are within our power, others are not. The opinions others hold of you fall entirely outside your power. To seek their approval is to hand them your soul. Stop handing it over.
Epictetus called this the dichotomy of control, the foundational architecture of Stoic freedom. When someone despises you, they are exercising their faculty of judgment, which belongs entirely to them. Your task is to govern your own hegemonikon, your ruling faculty, with such precision that their verdict becomes as irrelevant as the weather in a city you will never visit. Indifference is not weakness. Indifference is a fortress built from the inside.
Number 2, the discipline of absolute self-mastery. Those who despise you are watching for the crack, the trembling lip, the raised voice, the defensive argument. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, composed privately in the military campaigns of the 170s AD, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Self-mastery is not suppression. It is the cultivation of apatheia, freedom from reactive passion, not the absence of feeling.
Apatheia is frequently misread as coldness. It is, in truth, the highest form of inner architecture. The Stoic who practices self-mastery does not erupt, does not plead, does not perform suffering for an audience. Instead, every action becomes deliberate, every response measured. When your enemies witness a person who cannot be destabilized, who moves through provocation like a stone through water, they experience something they cannot name. It feels like trembling, and it is.
Number 3, the refusal to explain yourself. Cato the Younger, Rome's most fearless moral sentinel, never once adjusted his convictions to satisfy his accusers. When Julius Caesar's faction spread slander across Rome in 63 BC, Cato did not issue rebuttals. He simply continued living with transparent virtue. Seneca wrote, "Silence is an answer." Explaining yourself to those who despise you is an act of submission disguised as defense. Silence, worn with dignity, is devastating. And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next matters even more. Number 4, the practice of prosoche, vigilant self-attention. Prosoche is the Stoic art of watching your own inner state with the precision of a scholar studying a primary source. Not introspection for comfort, but rigorous attention to whether your judgments, desires, and actions align with virtue. Those who despise you want you distracted, reactive, self-ignorant. Prosoche is the antidote. Marcus Aurelius practiced prosoche every single morning in his private meditations. Texts never intended for public eyes, written in Greek, in military tents across the Danube frontier. He was the most powerful man on earth, and he spent the dawn interrogating his own character. Why? Because he understood that the person most likely to destroy you is not your enemy. It is the version of yourself that stops paying attention. Vigilant attention is a daily armor forged in solitude. Number 5, building in the darkness, the power of hidden progress. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's own teacher, exiled twice by Roman emperors, continued teaching philosophy in the open fields of Gyros Island. Banished, stripped of status, watched by enemies. He did not stop. He built. The Stoics taught that virtue is the only true good, and virtue can be practiced in any condition. When those who despise you believe they have silenced you, they reveal their ignorance of what you are actually building.
Hidden progress is not hiding from fear. It is the Stoics' strategic silence. Seneca wrote in his letters to Lucilius around 65 AD, "Retire into yourself as much as you can." This is not withdrawal from life. It is the concentrated assembly of capacity, while others waste energy on gossip and performance. Every skill developed quietly, every discipline practiced in obscurity, is compound interest on virtue. When it finally surfaces, those who despised your silence will not recognize the person before them. Number 6. Amor fati, the love of what is. This is the Stoic attitude that most confounds enemies. Amor fati, love your fate. Do not merely endure it. Marcus Aurelius formulated it not as resignation, but as the full embrace of reality's nature, logos, the cosmic reason governing all events. When those who despise you engineer your setbacks, and you respond not with bitterness, but with transformation, you remove from them the only tool they ever possessed, your suffering.
Amor fati is philosophically precise. It does not claim your circumstances are good. It claims your response to them can always be excellent. The Stoic does not perform optimism. The Stoic looks at the obstacle and asks with total seriousness, what does virtue require of me here, in this specific condition, on this specific day? That question, repeated with prosoche and answered with arete, transforms adversity into the very substance from which character is constructed. Your enemies built you.
Number 7. The attitude almost no one has mastered. The one that causes the deepest, most lasting silence in those who despise you. Memento mori, practiced as liberation, not as fear. Remember death, not as a morbid obsession, but as the ultimate clarifying lens. Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism in Athens around 300 BC, taught that the philosopher who truly reckons with impermanence needs nothing from human opinion, because human opinion itself is impermanent. Nothing survives contempt like indifference to permanence.
When you hold memento mori, not as philosophical decoration, but as a living practice, reviewing each evening what was used and what was wasted, something in your bearing changes permanently. You stop arguing with small people over small things. You stop needing validation from those whose opinions will not survive the decade. Seneca wrote in Letters 77, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what is left and live it properly." That is not despair. That is freedom. When someone who despises you witnesses a person for whom death itself holds no terror, someone who has already resolved the deepest existential question, they encounter an immovability they cannot penetrate. They bring fear. You bring logos. The contest ends before it begins. This was the promise. 7 attitudes, each precise, each historically grounded, each available to you now, in this life, on this day. The question is not whether you understand them. The question is whether you will practice them. Number 7 is the one that ends arguments before they start, because a person liberated by memento mori needs nothing from those who despise them. Subscribe if this reflection has moved something in you. Tomorrow, we go deeper into the Stoic art of premeditatio malorum. The bell ensures you miss nothing. And now, one question to carry with you. Which of these 7 have you already been practicing without knowing it? You trusted someone completely. You gave them access to your inner world, your plans, your fears, your loyalty, and they used it against you. Now it's late. The silence in the room feels heavier than any argument. You keep replaying the moment you realized the truth. Here is the real cost. Not the betrayal itself, but the slow erosion of your mind each time you revisit it. What if the wound isn't what they did, but what you keep doing with it?
2,000 years ago, Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about this exact corrosion. He called it the tyranny of the mind turned against itself. Tonight, we will move through 3 revelations. First, why betrayal destroys us from the inside rather than the outside. Second, the precise Stoic architecture for reclaiming your ruling faculty. And third, how to transform the wound into something iron. The real revelation waits at the end. Betrayal does not wound the body. It wounds the hegemonikon, what the Stoics called the ruling faculty of the soul, the seat of reason and judgment. When someone we trusted violates that trust, we experience a rupture not merely between 2 people, but inside our own inner architecture. Suddenly, the faculty designed to guide us is flooded with rage, shame, and obsessive review. The mind becomes its own enemy. This is where the real destruction begins.
Epictetus, born a slave, stripped of every external possession, understood betrayal at the structural level of existence. He wrote in the Enchiridion, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." The person who betrayed you committed an act in the external world, but the suffering you carry now lives entirely inside your own judgment. That distinction is not a consolation. It is a surgical instrument.
Here is what no one tells you about betrayal. The person who betrayed you has already moved on. They are not lying awake reviewing the moment. You are. Which means the extended suffering is not punishment delivered by them. It is punishment you are delivering to yourself, repeatedly, voluntarily. The Stoics had a word for this self-inflicted torment: pathe, disordered passions that override reason. You have become the jailer of your own hegemonikon.
But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Stoics did not ask you to suppress your pain or perform false serenity. Seneca explicitly warned against that mask. What they prescribed was something far more demanding: prosoche, vigilant, unflinching attention to your own inner movements. You must watch the anger arrive, name it, trace it back to its origin in your own judgment. This is not comfort. This is cognitive surgery performed on yourself, awake.
Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, a journal never meant for publication, these words: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He was not writing philosophy for admiration. He wrote it at war, betrayed by generals, abandoned by allies, watching the empire fracture. His private discipline was the dichotomy of control, relentlessly separating what lies within his faculty from what lies outside it. Betrayal falls outside. Your response falls inside.
And if this reflection is stirring something real in you, subscribe. What comes next cuts even deeper into the Stoic method. The concept Marcus Aurelius used is called the dichotomy of control, not as a platitude, but as a daily practice of forensic precision. Every morning, he would inventory his impressions. What can I govern today, and what cannot be governed? Betrayal by another person lives permanently in the ungovernable column. Your virtue, your response, your character, those belong entirely to you.
Now comes the deeper Stoic architecture. Seneca introduced premeditatio malorum, the deliberate premeditation of adversity. Before trusting anyone deeply, the Stoic mind rehearses loss, not out of pessimism, but out of clarity. When you have already contemplated the possibility of betrayal, the event, when it arrives, finds a mind that has prepared the terrain. It does not destroy unprepared ground. This is not paranoia. This is the armor of a philosopher, expected, reasoned, and ready.
Adiaphora, the Stoic category of indifference. What does this mean for betrayal? The person who wronged you, their opinion of you, their actions, these are externals. They are adiaphora, neither inherently good nor bad, because they lie beyond your governing faculty. Your character is not diminished by what they did. Only you can diminish your own character by responding without virtue. Epictetus said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are."
Wait, what comes next is what few people truly understand about the Stoic response to betrayal. Most assume Stoicism means distance, cold withdrawal, emotional shutdown. That is a fundamental misreading. The Stoics cultivated apatheia, not numbness, but freedom from disordered passion. The difference is profound. Apatheia allows deep feeling, grief, love, indignation, while the hegemonicon remains in command. You feel the fire without being consumed by it. That is not detachment. That is mastery.
Here is the practical application. Tomorrow morning, before the world demands anything from you, sit with a single sheet of paper. Write 2 columns. What is within my ruling faculty today, and what is not. Place the betrayal, the person, and their actions firmly in the second column. Then write in the first column one virtue you will embody despite what happened. Not for them, for the coherence of your own character. This is officium, your duty to your own inner architecture. In the second week, add a second practice, the evening review, what Epictetus called the examination of impressions. Before sleep, trace every moment when you allowed the betrayal to govern your mood, your words, or your decisions without your conscious consent. Do not judge yourself. Only observe, name, and return governance to the hegemonicon. This nightly forensic audit is not punishment. It is the slow, deliberate reclamation of the inner citadel that no external person can breach if you maintain it.
The amor fati practice is the final and most demanding tool. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Love your fate." Not tolerate it, love it. This means actively willing that the betrayal happened, because it has become part of the logos, the rational structure of the universe in which your character is being forged. This is not surrender. This is the highest assertion of Stoic will, to take the very thing that tried to break you and declare that it belongs in your story and serves your becoming.
In 65 AD, Seneca was ordered by Emperor Nero, his former student, to take his own life. The ultimate betrayal. A man he had mentored for years, now demanding his death. Witnesses recorded that Seneca dictated philosophy until the final moment, speaking of virtue to those around him. He told his weeping friends, "Where are your maxims of philosophy, or the preparation of so many years' study against evils to come?" He did not collapse. The Stoic architecture held. That is what we are building here.
The promise from the beginning. There is a single sentence that ends the tyranny of betrayal. Here it is, from Epictetus, written in the 2nd century. It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. The wound was real. The person failed you. And none of that has power over your hegemonicon unless you grant it. You were not destroyed. You are being forged. If this moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we examine what Marcus Aurelius did each night before sleep. Does betrayal define you or refine?